How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the March edition of the Eureka Whiskey Club, the virtual tasting. If you are new here, welcome. If you're a seasoned Eureka Whiskey Club member, then thanks again for joining. This month is a very exciting month. A lot of interest in this month's pick, and I am honored and thankful to have Katie O'Donnell join me from Bond and Royal, and we'll talk a little bit about what Bond and Royal is and how it ties into the Weller brand. But yeah, Katie, thank you for joining us. And if you could introduce yourself to our members, let them know just a little bit about yourself, maybe your background, and then tell us what Bond and Royal is and how it ties into the Weller brand.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me, Trevor and Eureka. This is super exciting. The whiskey that you are about to imbibe tonight, not a lot of people in the country right now get to have this opportunity. So you guys are really blessed, and I hope that you're excited. But a little bit about me. I'm originally from Massachusetts. I live in Long Beach, California now. I've been here for about 10 years. And I studied musical theater in college, which is kind of like, how did she end up selling booze for a living? Yeah, a bit of a departure. So I was living in New York City, and I just wasn't feeling it. So I moved out to Southern California with no hopes of stardom. I just wanted to live in Southern California. So I came out here. I started in the hospitality industry as a server, and then I transferred over to be a bartender, and that's where I started to fall in love with spirits. Actually, Buffalo Trace was the first bourbon that I was introduced to when I moved to Los Angeles, which was 10 years ago. So it's not a big brand now, but it was definitely a smaller brand back then. I have to always reiterate, we're still not a big brand. So yeah, I was behind the bar, nerding out over everything. And then I was approached by Bond and Royal to do a kind of ambassador position. And at the time, it was really agave focused with some cordials here and there. But as we have progressed over the past 4 years that I've been with the company, we are now covering the entire Buffalo Trace portfolio, which includes Weller, what we're having tonight. And so you're probably thinking, okay, I've never heard of Bond and Royal before. Heard of Sazerac.
I'll be honest with you, I had not heard of it before until we were introduced, a few weeks ago.
Yeah. So Bond and Royal is a pretty cool thing. We are basically the global purveyors of artisanal spirits. That's our tagline. And we work with two sister companies. One is Sazerac North America, and the other is 375 Park Avenue Spirits. So between those two, I cover all of the craft artisanal brands in those portfolios. So if there's a story behind it, if the distillery has a great home story linked into the culture of all around the world, those are the spirits that you'll see us focusing on with Bond and Royal within those two portfolios.
Awesome. Yeah. And you said you've been with them for about 4 years now?
Yeah, coming up on 4 years.
Awesome. And how long has the Weller brand been part of the portfolio at Bond and Royal?
It's been about 18 months now.
Okay. So it's
kind of a newbie. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, everyone should have gotten their boxes. I'm sure if you haven't dived into it yet, hopefully you have yours ready. We'll be doing some tasting here of the Weller Foolproof Barrel Pick in a little bit, but definitely wanted to get some background on the Weller brand. And, Katie is absolutely an expert on the brand, and some of the things that she shared with me prior were very interesting. So I'm excited for everyone to learn about the Weller brand and learn about, how it came to be and where we're at today, and maybe talk about some exciting things that are in store for the future. So, Katie, why don't you just give us a little bit of background on the Weller brand, William LaRue Weller, who he was, and kind of how the brand came to fruition. And we'd love to learn some history about the Weller brand.
I love history. I am a history nerd when it comes to alcohol. I think it's the coolest part of history. It's tied into everything you can imagine across the board. And, bourbon is America's only native spirit, which is really cool to think about. So we should be really proud of of what our forefathers have created for us as a country. What we have with Weller is a Louisville native. He was born in Kentucky in 1825 to two families. Both his mother's family and his father's family have historically been in the distilling business and in the whiskey making business. So he has it rooted, it's in his blood. In 1849, William LaRue Weller starts a wholesale company called W.L. Weller and Sons. It's super common when you're looking at old wholesale companies that they would have their own brand that they would develop. So William LaRue Weller had a specific style in mind when he went to market, and it was that of wheat. So having a whiskey that was focused with a lot of wheat and rather than rye. So traditionally speaking, bourbons were always made with rye. They weren't even called bourbons back in the 1800s, but the whiskeys were made with rye. It was very uncommon to have a wheated whiskey. So he took this style and genre and really exploded the market with it. He's really excited about having this really beautiful spirit that was a little bit more approachable. And his tagline was always honest whiskey at an honest price. And that's important because at the time, a lot of people were adulterating their whiskey. So wholesalers were buying whiskey barrels and then throwing in tar or tobacco juice, things that weren't really what you wanted to imbibe on a regular basis. So Weller was really adamant about not having any of those additives, having an honest whiskey that you'd be really confident about.
So when you say, because bourbon has to be made with corn, so when you say it was made with rye, that was the secondary grain, right? And Weller was, instead of using rye as a secondary grain, he was using wheat as a secondary grain.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah. So his history continues with something that's really unique and important to our history at Sazerac, is that he employed a gentleman named Julian Van Winkle Sr. as his salesman for the West United States, or the Midwest United States. And Julian Van Winkle Sr. was a great salesman. And he took this Weller branded whiskey, wheated whiskey, and just exploded it everywhere. Everybody wanted to get their hands on this wheated Weller whiskey. And so they had an incredible partnership. He started working with them around 1893. So pretty well after 1849 when the company was established. And then Weller actually passed away in 1899. So it was relatively recent after he'd started his partnership with Julian Van Winkle. And Julian loved this wheated bourbon so much that he decided to honor the legacy of Weller. And so he actually eventually purchased the company W.L. Weller and Sons, the wholesaler company, in the early 1900s. And he and another salesman actually did that together, and they continued to spread this wheated whiskey around the world. Then we creep up into Prohibition. Oh, I should mention, this whole time, all of this whiskey is being produced by Stitzel Distillery. So from when Weller originally started this wholesaler, that was his source. He wasn't actually distilling all this whiskey himself. He was purchasing it from Stitzel, guiding them in the flavor profile that he wanted with this wheat, but then selling it as his own brand, which is super common. Fast forward to 1919, the infamous 1919, when Prohibition came into play. So the Stitzel Distillery was really lucky because they got one of 6 licenses to distill throughout Prohibition. So they got one of the 6 medicinal licenses. There were 211 distilleries in the Kentucky area prior to Prohibition, and only 6 of them were able to make whiskey for those years, of those dry, torturous years. I can't even imagine, after what we went through last year, how that was even physically possible.
I think Hill wasn't one of the other ones. Can't remember.
Yep. Buffalo Trace, actually, the distillery where Buffalo Trace sits today, was one of them as well.
Yeah.
I know Old Forester was one. Yeah, so Stitzel was up there. Stitzel got that license, and really excited because they could continue to produce these whiskeys that they had been producing. It wasn't necessarily called Weller if it was sold from the Stitzel Weller distillery during Prohibition, but it was still being made there at the same time. Yeah, but Pappy later became called Pappy as we know him today. He had to dissolve the wholesale business. How can you have a wholesaler if you can't sell to consumers?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, the W.L. Weller and Sons wholesaler was dissolved in 1919, but the Stitzel distillery stayed on. And at that point, Pappy was not, he was a great businessman. He was not behind any ball. He was on top of it, and he had a vested interest in Stitzel distillery. So he had his hand in the pot. He knew where this was going. And when Prohibition was over, they actually partnered together with the original Weller name and the Stitzel name. And in 1935, on Kentucky Derby Day, they opened the Stitzel Weller distillery, and it was under the ownership of Julian Van Winkle.
Why Van Winkle didn't use his own name? Why he continued using the Weller name? He just had such a respect for the person, and it's a very like unselfish thing to do. It's like, why it could have easily been like the Van Winkle and Stitzler distillery.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he didn't even come out with the brand, wasn't even named.
I mean, it ended up working out for his family, right? The Winkle name now, regardless. So
yeah, I think it was a good thing to be humble on his part, because it gave him that stature. You know, he's not a greedy man. He's not looking for his own family gain. He really was paying homage to this man that set him up with great whiskey, and he really was the creator of this wheated whiskey. So it's pretty cool. Kind of a brief overlay. Any questions in there?
I think it's great. And so when did the obviously Stitzel Weller is not around anymore, and I think a lot of bourbon enthusiasts, whiskey enthusiasts know the name of Stitzel Weller, and Stitzel Weller eventually became Buffalo Trace. What did that transition look like as far as going from Stitzel Weller, lasting through Prohibition, coming back, and then eventually becoming Buffalo Trace? We've talked about on previous calls kind of the bourbon falling off as a popular spirit in the 80s. The 80s, clear spirits were king. Everyone was drinking clear spirits, and if you haven't been on a call before, we talked about just what I'm referencing is that whiskey in the probably 70s and 80s and maybe even the early 90s was very much perceived as like a drink of the greatest generation, right? Drink of boomers perceived the whiskey as, a drink of their parents, and wasn't cool. So I know that played a big effect, but if you could talk a little bit more about just the transition from Stitzel Weller to Buffalo Trace.
So it's interesting, and this is kind of a myth to debunk, I guess I can say. So Stitzel Weller Distillery actually does exist today, and Buffalo Trace is a separate distillery from Stitzel Weller today.
Okay.
Yeah, so they were operating independently the whole time, but it wasn't called Buffalo Trace until 1999. So at the time, it could have been any other name. It went through being George T. Stagg to being Ancient Aged. There was, a bunch of different names. If you get to go to the distillery, they'll tell you the whole history year by year. You get to know which buildings were involved in which. But that had its own. The Buffalo Trace Distillery was its own place. Stitzel Weller was its own distillery as well. So the Van Winkle family.
Bullet makes their whiskey there right now, right?
Now Bullet, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly. So Stitzel Weller is pumping out brands like Old Fitzgerald, Weller. You have, I think it's called Rebel Yell, and there's another one that's like Cabin Still or something like that. These old, really, these dusty bottles, and that's a gem at this point. But they were producing those brands well throughout the middle of the last century. It wasn't until I have to check up the exact date, but Stitzel Weller was a functioning distillery until 1992, which is crazy to think about. And then it completely just kind of fell apart. To your point, there wasn't that need for bourbon. People just weren't drinking it. Everyone was drinking vodka, gin. You even started to see tequila start to jump in the 90s with some really big prominent brands. So bourbon was definitely a secondary thought. And so it was in 1972 that the Weller family actually sold Weller, and that's kind of when it had its fall off from its glory days, so to speak. So in those 20 years, it changed hands. It was kind of like a commercial commodity. and a business commodity to the people who owned it, and they were buying and selling it and trying to race to see. Japanese were a huge drinker of bourbon at the time. And in the 90s, the stock market in Japan plummeted, and all of that secured business pretty much went away. And so the current owners of the distillery sold off all the brands. And that's where Sazerac came into play. So Sazerac purchased Buffalo Trace Distillery in 1992, making it once again a family-owned distillery. And just happened to coincide with the closing of Stitzel Weller and the offering up of brands. If you know anything about historic Sazerac, or if you want to see the business trends, we like to buy brands that have maybe been forgotten about, that people they had their heyday and then they went through these common trends and they just fell off and people weren't interested in them anymore. And then we take them and we bring them back to life. And that's exactly what happened with Weller. It was a prime opportunity. We acted at the right moment. We had the equipment and the ability to make a wheated mash, which we didn't have before at Buffalo Trace. So it was filling this void that we had in our portfolio, and it was welcoming back into the limelight this beautiful brand of wheated bourbon. Yeah. So they're technically two different distilleries, and Stitzel Weller kind of fell apart when it was this big, beautiful icon of a distillery that had so much history that just was a dinosaur that was kind of fading away, and now you have it coming back to life slowly but surely in our current bourbon boom that we are experiencing right now.
Yeah, I mean, you see old bottles of Stitzel Weller. I see them, every now and then on forums, and been to a couple bars in LA that have some, old bottles. So I've been lucky enough to taste some of the old juice, and it's they made great whiskey, and you guys, the tradition is being continued. So how close are the recipes to the Weller recipes now? Like, how close are they to what was made at the Stitzel Weller pre-Buffalo Trace? Like, I'd imagine they have documentation on how those recipes were made. Like, are they following those recipes to a T, or have they taken some creative liberties? If you have any insight on that, I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, the beautiful thing about Buffalo Trace is we keep a lot of things proprietary. So I'm not exactly sure what the Weller, we call it mash bill number 3, which it's the wheated mash bill. I'm not exactly sure what our ratios are. I can guarantee you that when Sazerac reinstates a brand or revives a brand, it's step one is flavor pairing. So tasting it, how do we match this flavor profile, and what is the best route to do that? And it might have, maybe if they did have that, I'm not sure if they had the exact recipe or not, but there weren't a lot of wheated bourbons out there to begin with. And it was basically, I'm sure, matching those flavors, figuring out the nuances, and really paying homage to the original recipe.
So yeah, I mean, and that's the same mash bill that Pappy is, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So for those who don't know, I mean, we made a little joke about it on our whiskey club cocktail thing this month. The cocktail we have here, let me see if I can show that. It's called the Poor Man's Pappy Old Fashioned. So
it's a very common term for Weller, yes.
So it's the same mash bill. It's essentially the same juice, and the Van Winkle family is still very involved in in what barrels get selected to be dedicated to the Pappy brand. So I think that Weller has kind of benefited, right, from the explosion of the Pappy brand, just in the fact that it is the same mash bill. It technically is the same juice, which is absolutely amazing. And it's theoretically, the price point is much better than Pappy, but
theoretically is the key word there.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so they're the same mash bill. We are definitely putting the Van Winkle lineup in a different, because they tend to be older in age in general, they tend to sit lower in the rick houses, just because that's how you're going to not eliminate, and you're not going to get as much angel share. So rick house placement is really big in the difference between the two brands. And anyone who's a really big bourbon nerd loves to discern the difference where it was in the rick house and what flavors that imparts. So it's a real thing. definitely something that changes the flavor profile. So I truly believe that they taste like very different brands, despite having the same recipe. And there's a lot of reasons that's predominantly why.
Like you said, rickhouse placement is key, right? The higher the barrels are, heat rises. Closer the barrel is to the floor, it's maybe picking up some notes if there's like a limestone floor, or there's a lot of rickhouse placement is definitely a key differentiator in flavor profiles.
Yeah.
So I think normally here we would make the cocktail. We saw a lot of people online. It's a great old-fashioned recipe, and I highly recommend it. And with this amazing whiskey, it's definitely something that you should try out if you're interested. Actually, this is kind of our go-to old-fashioned recipe at the restaurants.
Awesome.
It's slightly different. We're not going to give away all our secrets, but
proprietary.
Yeah, so it's slightly different, but pretty much the same as what we make in the restaurants. Normally now I would make the cocktail, but not to say that I wouldn't with the Weller, but I'm in the process of a move right now, so I don't quite have all my bar materials with me. But just if you're interested in making the cocktail, it is there for you. 2 dashes of herbal bitters. You can use Angostura, is pretty industry standard. We have a company that makes bitters for us out of Seattle, Washington, that we use in the restaurant. So slight difference there. And yeah, it's a great old fashioned, poor man's Pappy old fashioned. We don't do we make what we like to consider making old fashions the right way, and not muddling orange wedges and bright bleached cherries in there. So if you don't want to use your Weller Foolproof for that recipe, feel free to use that recipe with any other whiskey. But if you want to use your Weller Foolproof, go right ahead. It's a great drink. There's also some great history, just some reading on here about the brand, and then obviously the tasting profile. I know that in past months we have broken out the tasting notes for each individual barrel. This time around, we just kind of did generic tasting notes for everyone. So hopefully you're able to identify the barrel you have and cross-reference with the tasting notes we have here, and then maybe take note of some subtle differences, because obviously the barrels are going to vary between the tasting profile is going to vary slightly between the barrels, like we said, rickhouse placement, what rickhouse it's in, so on and so forth. So I have barrel number 32 here, which we'll be tasting in a bit. But I want to talk a little bit more about the Weller brand. Joe says he's enjoying his Weller very much. So Joe, I know Joe, and he's cracking in early. What expected from my good friend Joe, who's commenting here. And just a reminder, we do have a comment section, a chat section. So if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, if you leave a comment on Facebook or YouTube, we will see it here. So if you have any questions or comments, or want to put those in the chat, we'll get to Q&A as we go along, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end. So strongly encourage questions, because Katie's the expert, and I know she'll be able to answer all of them for us. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, because I know it's a hot topic, but obviously Weller, living here in where I live in Southern California, we're a little bit spoiled, where Weller, I don't want to say it's easy to find, but it's more accessible. At least certain lines of Weller. Obviously the Weller Foolproof would not fall into that category, but talk to me about kind of the decision to keep it so limited, and why not expand the brand? I know there was some extensions with, obviously, the Weller Foolproof. I think it's been around for less than a year. And then there's some other extensions of the line. So maybe talk to me about why you guys decided to extend the line, and why it's continued to be such a limited product.
Yeah, for sure. So the line is pretty expansive. If you know anything about Buffalo Trace Distillery and the brands that we produce out of there, there's something for everybody. literally across the board. The differences between Buffalo Trace to Eagle Rare to E.H. Taylor, you're going to find within our portfolio as a whole your bourbon. And kind of took that same mindset with Weller, as weeded mash bills became very, very, very popular. And so why not expand it so that people can explore what happens with a weeded bourbon at a different proof? What happens with weeded bourbon if it's single barrel? What happens if you unfilter it or non-chill filter it? So there's all of these different levers or variables that can be a part of it. And because that's our MO, is we want to create that bourbon, the perfect bourbon for everybody, this was a really great opportunity to do so. To your point, yes, we don't have a lot of bourbon right now out in the field, but we for the past couple of years, we've been building a rick house every 4 months, which is a huge feat. These rick houses are massive, and they are going to be allowing us to lay down a lot more whiskey across every single brand. So there is plenty of weeded bourbon being laid down for your future Wellers. And basically, we want the brand to continue to grow. So what better way than have everyone have their own favorite variety of Weller? The Special Reserve is pretty much our entry. It's a 90 proof, and it's what we recommend mixing in cocktails 100%. It's, if there's someone that you know that's newer to bourbon drinking, this is a great first experience with Weller. So I always say Weller Special Reserve is definitely a go-to for your friends who say they don't want to try bourbon, or they're afraid of it, or whatever excuse they have. Just pour them a glass of Special Reserve and make them take it.
I'm not to discount what you said, but I would not pour any Weller brand for someone I knew that was getting into whiskey, just selfishly. I
right, you're like, I want to keep it for myself.
That's what good old Buffalo Trace is for, in my opinion. That's an amazing whiskey, and you know. But anyways, if you're maybe people are more generous than I. Yeah.
Who knows? So then we have the 107, Antique 107, which it's interesting with the Antique 107. There's a lot of history going back to that. When Pappy Van Winkle was selling Weller, he was selling it at 107 proof. So hence the Antique 107 being on there. It's a really great, that's where you get to see the expansion of the proof. So when you go up to 107, you're going to get more flavor. You're going to get more explosion of the actual whiskey in the barrel on your first sip. It's just going to brighten up everything. And it's just a different experience than being with the 90 proof. And you can really tell the difference between them. They're all Wellers except for the 12-year or 6 to 7 years aged.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I know the Antique is it's a crowd favorite. And we did a barrel pick the very first month of the Whiskey Club. We did a barrel pick for the Antique 107. That's kind of what kicked this all off. And so happy we can do another barrel pick of the full proof. And just a teaser for everyone, we are going to be doing another month of Antique 107 sometime probably later this year. Probably sometime, I'd guess, the very end of the year, maybe November, December. No promises, but that's what the plan is.
No promises.
Yeah. As Katie can attest to, these barrel picks take a little while to get a hold of. So
absolutely. Yeah. And then, so maybe the most interesting of the lineup is the Cypb, which is really what opened our eyes to why people wanted more Weller. We did a crowdsourcing exercise that was paired with education, and that showed us, it was basically anyone in the US could go on and say what kind of mash bill they wanted to see their bourbon. What was their ideal mash bill? Everyone said weeded, not everyone, but that was the predominant winner. And then you have, okay, what age do you want to see your whiskey aged at? And the average was 6 to 7 years. Okay. Where do you want it to sit in the rick house? Everyone said the top floor. So we're looking 4 and above. All right. And then the proof was 90 to 100 proof. So Craft Your Perfect Bourbon Weller is basically, it's a really good example to what kind of jump started the rest of the lineup coming out. Where can we play with this? People really, really were eager to have more weeded whiskey out there. And so the Craft Your Perfect Bourbon just opened up the floodgates for Weller, and it made us realize that this was going to be the sweetheart brand. And it's it's won amazing awards. It even won more awards this year. So it's the gift that continues to give, and it's all because of what people wanted.
And are you going to continue using that same recipe for like the same, or are you going to do another round of, is crowdsourcing the right word? I don't know, or another round of surveying people to see if maybe like create your perfect bourbon round 2 or something where you get another round of information, maybe it varies slightly, or are you guys going to stick with that, recipe, I guess?
I think it would be cool to do a second edition of this, but I do not have any insight. While we are a very experimental company, we're also very tight-lipped about what's coming out. I usually find out about new projects when the press release goes out.
Yeah, well, can we get on a conference call with Harlan and then just ask him to do it?
Yeah, let's suggest it. I'm down with that. Totally down with that. And then you move into some of the other Weller line. The 12-year, obviously, we're playing with age. It's sitting at 90 proof as well, so it's just like the special reserve, but you're adding a couple more years. So you get a lot more of that barrel flavor in the 12-year. I really like the 12-year. A lot of times people will say, well, what's the difference between Weller 12 and Van Winkle 12? It's flavor. It's just flavor profile. What are we looking for? What are we looking for? Yes, it's the same mash bill, the same amount of time in the barrel, but the barrels are all different, and you would taste the difference.
And like I said earlier, the Van Winkle family, has say in what barrels are selected for that. So, both amazing whiskeys, but just one selected to be Weller and one selected to be Van Winkle.
Exactly. As we continue, we have what you guys are having tonight, our full proof. So the full proof is 114 proof. That is barrel entry for Weller. So this is a little bit of interesting point of just differentiation. You can look at the term full proof does not mean cask strength. That's just it's often confused as being cask strength, but it's called full proof for a reason. It's generally what barrel entry is. So every distillery has a different choice of what they want to use as their barrel entry proof. And even within Buffalo Trace, every line has its different barrel entry proof. And Harlan found that with the wheated mash bill, 114 was where it sat, was really where it was at, because you wouldn't get the nuances if you had put it into the barrel at 125. It's just a little too volatile of a new make spirit with the wheat to let it really age properly and let those flavors come out. It might be overpowering, and they found that 114 was the sweet spot. So full proof is coming at 114, and it is unfiltered. So it's the only one in the Weller lineup currently that is unfiltered, which is a very, very big point of differentiation as well. So, yeah. You're still muted.
Sorry, I was told I had some background noise, so I'm trying to eliminate that when I'm not talking. So talk to me about the filtration. So Weller Full Proof is non-chill filtered. Mm-hmm. So I know we've talked a little bit about NCF before on previous calls, but refresh our memories for those that weren't on those calls or haven't heard of the term NCF. I know that's a popular term amongst bourbon enthusiasts. So what is NCF, non-chill filtered, and how does it affect the whiskey? And maybe talk about some what's the word I'm looking for? Some benefits of NCF, and maybe why people prefer that, or why people prefer it being chill filtered. What's the difference?
Cool. Yes. So non-chill filtration means we are not, when you chill filter a whiskey, you basically take the whiskey and you chill it down to freezing temperatures. And then you have all of the sediment and all of these fatty acids. I mean, whiskey is science at the end of the day. So there are all these crazy compounds that go into it to make this flavor what it is. It's coming out of the wood, it's coming off of the still, coming out of the char. There's all different kinds of elements that are running loose in the barrel as it's aging. And when you chill filter something, you are taking basically that whiskey and you're going to skim or filter. I imagine it like I'm skimming a pool, like, I'm like going to clean my pool, and I have this skimmer, and I'm going to go and I'm going to collect all the sediment off of the top of this whiskey. And then you will have a product that is, no matter what temperature you serve it at, it's going to be exactly the same color, consistency. There's going to be no irregularities. it's very much a visual. It's very good for the visual eye. If you decide to non-chill filter, which we did with the foolproof, and a lot of distilleries will assign a certain proof point where they choose either to chill filter or non-chill filter, and it's for flavoring for the most part, and for also the ambitiousness that we know when we get into these cask strength or foolproof whiskeys, we have not first time drinkers, so they're ready to get a little gritty, a little. And I don't want to say dirty, but you just want to have this extra, layer of authenticity, and we want to taste everything that went into this whiskey. So when you do not chill filter, the result is a whiskey that when it gets cold, it might turn cloudy on the shelf. When you get it home, it might have particles floating in it. It might look like there's something in your whiskey, and in fact there is. And the reason why we want to leave those things in there is because of flavor. It's just absolutely tastes like night and day.
I always tell a story about an ABC officer coming in and making me dump a bottle of like a really nice non-chilled filtered whiskey because it looked like it had some floaties in it, and it was because the temperature dropped and the proteins, bonded together. And I tried to tell him, it said, if I just shake the bottle, it'll, the proteins will separate.
It'll go away.
This specific officer did not understand and was convinced we had some contaminants.
You rectified your whiskey.
Yeah, and made me dump it. And I was like, I was so frustrated. I can't remember what whiskey it was, but if it were Weller foolproof, I think I would have probably put up more of a fight than I did. But yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely something that it provides a lot more flavor at the end of the day, and the choice is pretty much cosmetic at the end of the day. Just consistency wise, it makes it easier for the consumer to trust a bourbon maker if there aren't things that start to show up in their whiskey. So for the more not, I don't want to say sophisticated, the more experienced whiskey drinkers who understand this concept and are not afraid of it and embrace it, it's the best payoff ever. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think if I'm sure a lot of people are already ahead of us, but I think that now is a good time to start drinking some whiskey. People probably noticed at the beginning I had a starter pour, but if you want to get into your foolproof, I'm sure a lot of people already have. I wouldn't have.
I'm jealous of all of you. I'm having a beautiful single barrel of Buffalo Trace.
Okay.
I didn't get my hands on a Weller. Also, just to debunk the rumors or the thoughts out there, just because I work for the company doesn't mean I always have this whiskey. In fact, they try to deter us from having it so we can give it all to y'all.
Yeah, I think I've been lucky enough to get one bottle previous to this, and we got like one case of the foolproof, and I was lucky enough to be able to purchase a bottle, and was awesome. And then obviously the samples that were sent when we selected the barrels. But if you want to follow along, we have our tasting notes here. We do our flavor scales. So this one is pretty heavily oaked, as you can see, just with it being the foolproof. We're going more towards like the sweet nutty flavors, and then the sweet scale at the bottom. So being a wheated bourbon, we talked about in the past, but the wheat grain has a higher protein structure. The structure of the proteins allow the whiskey to be a little bit more velvety, have a little bit more heavy of a mouthfeel. So usually you can tell with the legs of the whiskey, if the legs fall slower, a good indication that not of proof or anything, but just of general mouthfeel. And with the wheated bourbons, we tend to have a much more velvety coating mouthfeel. So cheers to everybody. Katie, I feel bad. I'm sorry, but Buffalo Trace is a damn good substitute.
Yeah, I'm fine. Don't stress.
So obviously being at 114 proof, we're going to get a lot of the alcohol burn initially on the nose. So if you want to open up the whiskey a little bit more, typically I tend to drink the whiskey at the bottle strength first, and then add drops of water along the way if I want to open it up a little bit. Mm-hmm. But if you want to just drink it at 114 proof. That's great as well. It's sometimes I've drank whiskey at like much higher proofs, and I'm a big advocate of once it gets past anything higher than this, I definitely would add a little bit of water to it. I'd probably add a little bit of water to this just to open it up. But just a huge vanilla note on the nose. We get that like dark chocolate cherry as well. Clearly, oak is a big, slight butterscotch.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, that burn is definitely there.
Yeah.
So the palate really follows the nose. I get a little bit more of like nuttiness on the palate. I'm actually going to just add a couple drops of water to mine. People are probably rioting that I'm putting water into Weller Foolproof just a little bit just to open it up.
I think it's always a good thing to try out. Like play with your whiskey. Have fun with it. See where you like it to sit, and then own your decision, because everyone doesn't. No one cares how you drink it as long as you drink it.
Yeah, so I just added a couple drops of water. I'm getting a lot more of that caramel note coming through. Obviously, a little bit less of the alcohol burn. Vanilla is still obviously prominent. A little bit of honey. The oak is a huge factor here for me. And obviously the finish is long and lingering. You know, it sticks around there with you. Finish is very quite dry in my opinion, but phenomenal whiskey overall, and definitely a whiskey that I think if you have the willpower, you want to save this for special occasions or drinks with friends. But if you don't have the willpower, you may finish it in a week. Who knows? But it's definitely a great whiskey. So I know this was I'm on a lot of the whiskey forums now, and I know it was a very hot item. So if you were lucky enough to get in this month, congratulations, and we hope you really enjoy this bottle. Katie, I do have a couple more questions for you, and then just a reminder to our people watching live here, we'd love to get some comments and questions from you in the chat. So if there's anything that you're curious about the Weller brand, it doesn't have to be Weller Foolproof, just anything Weller related, please ask away. I know Katie would love to answer the questions. So the color of the labels of Weller have some meanings. You want to talk to us about that and what the labels represent? Well,
it's interesting because a lot of people think that they have a lot of meaning behind them. And I have some Armenian friends that are adamant that there are Armenian colors of the flag. It was made for them. It was not top of mind, but absolutely happy to celebrate the culture and do that. No, ironically enough, it's consumer science. So if you look at the old bottles of Weller I was actually looking at something from earlier, like maybe 10 years ago, the Weller Antique and the Weller Special Reserve were in the same bottle, and they looked exactly the same. And the only thing that was different was this cursive writing that was really little below.
Yeah.
What that does to the consumer is it's confusing when you walk into a bar or a store and you're looking, because they keep these far in the back bar. You don't necessarily know what they have to offer. The really cool thing about Weller is that we figured out a way to color code our whiskeys. So it's consumer science that if you remember a color and a flavor, you have an association. So you like the red Weller, you're going to remember the red Weller before you're going to remember that that's Antique 107, just across the board. And so every line that everyone that comes out is going to have its defining color, so that you can quickly identify it. And then also your brain doesn't have to work as hard, because color association is super easy. Yeah. I wanted there to be this whole story about, well, Harlan's favorite color was orange, so when he released Single Barrel, he went with orange, but I still don't know what his favorite color is. I think it's probably blue because of Wheatley vodka, but that's just my guess.
Good old Wheatley vodka. Good stuff.
Yeah. It's made using the same wheat as Weller.
Oh, really? No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the red winter wheat. We use the same wheat source. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting story, and I've noticed that with a lot of brands. If you can have a color association or a number association, it's a lot easier for everyone involved, including the bartender.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm trying to remember what last time I had Weller Foolproof. I'm just getting so much more barrel characteristic off of this than the previous bottle I had, which is definitely interesting. So I wonder, don't quite remember where this barrel was in the rick house, but definitely getting a lot more barrel characteristic, a lot more oak than I did on the previous bottle I had. So one of our members asked a question here. They said they want to know how they can tell if their dusty Rebel Yell is Sitzel Weller. What are the clues that they should look for?
Well, I don't really know the answer to this because I've never seen a bottle of Rebel Yell. But my advice would be to look for on the back of the bottle. There's usually an address or a defining locator factor that will tell you where it was bottled. That is step one. If that's not available to you or if that label has been pulled off, chances are it was probably made at Sitzel Weller. But you can also look through. There's going to be a number code on the newer bottles, so you can always track that back by just digging into the internet. Like I said, I've never even had a bottle of Rebel Yell. I would love that. I think that sounds really amazing. I'm not even sure where it's made today. I know Sazerac doesn't make it, so that's a good question.
Rob, you're required to share your bottle now, just so you know.
Absolutely.
That was one of our members, Rob, who asked that question. So we have a couple more Q&As in the chat, but I do have one last question for me personally, and I kind of touched on it earlier, and you answered the whole second round of CYPB. I'll start drafting my email to Harlan after this.
Okay, perfect.
But I know, like you mentioned, Weller went through a rebranding recently and kind of changed the shape of the bottles, changed the labels a little bit, like you mentioned. And I know you said you like to keep, or Sazerac and likes to keep things close to the chest. Is there any plans to expand on the line of Weller? Any new, maybe there's a Weller 15-year that is coming out? I don't know. I'm asking. So
yeah. To your point, I don't really know either. I mean, the single barrel was a surprise when our single barrel line came up. So we do have now a Weller single barrel. It's with the orange label, so you can look for that out there. It's very, very rare at this point in time. It was
that got released was that last year that got released?
Yeah. So it's super new. I don't know that there's anything in the line. I mean, obviously we have our Buffalo Trace Antique collection, which everyone who works with the distillery, we call the BTAC collection, and sometimes I throw that acronym around and people don't know what I'm talking about. Buffalo Trace Antique collection. We have William LaRue Weller is the wheated. It's going to be uncut, unfiltered. So that's almost your straight from the barrel.
Yeah, that gets up in proof like 130s, 140s sometimes, right? Depending on the year.
Yep. And there is a spreadsheet out there that somebody made. I don't know that anyone from the company made it, but some enthusiastic fan I think I've seen out there. You can see every release and the proof and the aging on it, which is very interesting. I don't know. So Buffalo Trace's motto is honor tradition or honor history and embrace change. So I would think that we definitely have some more things up our sleeve for Weller. 15 years is a good guess. I think we just came out with a Blanton straight from the barrel. So maybe that's a cool trend, because I have noticed the higher proofs have become much more popular. I mean, Stag Junior has blown up over the past couple of years and just become a crowd pleaser. So what if we can do something like that with Weller? I don't know. I'm just imagining and daydreaming at this point. but maybe manifesting.
I had my hands on a Stag Junior barrel pick, but it seems like that's kind of it.
There's like two. There's like two. You couldn't service your whole community with 2 barrels. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got the whole portfolio is obviously amazing. I mean, just to do some promotion here for us, we actually just were able to secure some of the BTAC or Buffalo Trace Antique Collection finished Corazon tequila bottles. So,
my gosh, you can't see, but behind this, I have agave plants on my living room wall. I am in love. Yeah, I like I said, I started off with this job and it was primarily agave focused. So these Corazon Express, we call them a Corazon Expressiones that you're talking about, and they are just phenomenal. I mean, insane. We have a Sazerac Rye edition. We have a George T. Stagg, a Thomas Handy. There is out there, apparently, I've never seen it in the flesh, a William LaRue Weller Corazon, which I haven't tasted yet. But these tequilas really do actually showcase the barrels that they came from, which is so cool and a really interesting way to just see how a barrel and how a whiskey can impart a different spirit.
Yeah, we're getting the Thomas Handy and then the George T. Stagg variants of the Corazon. So yeah, I'm super excited. I haven't had them, so I'm gonna have to go to a Eureka and get a.
They're incredible. They're añejos. They are aged to perfection, so they all are different ages. We have Sazerac is partners with Casa San Matias Distillery in Jalisco in Mexico, and we have been working with them for a long time. So when the opportunity came for them to age some tequila for us in these very rare barrels, we were so excited about it, and they were so excited about it, and it's just an incredible program. I recommend going out and trying them. We also have a single barrel Corazon program that is not the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection, but you'll see Blanton's, Weller, Buffalo Trace, and Eagle Rare in 1792 as well. So you'll see tequilas that are aged in those barrels, really starting to cross the boundaries of categories, and it's pretty cool to see the impact that these whiskeys leave on this agave spirit.
Yeah, I'm super excited to try it.
Nice.
Yeah, I think so. Alice had one last question, and then I think we're gonna wrap it up tonight. And cool. This is probably it's like asking my mother to tell me who her favorite child is. Alice wants to know what your favorite whiskeys are. I think before you told me one, I think before we started, and I won't ruin it, but Rob, one of our members, had a poll up on his Instagram the other day asking about this whiskey, and I voted yes. So tell me about Elmer.
So yeah, I have a bottle back here out of Buffalo Trace Distillery. This is my jam, this Elmer T. Lee, and this bottle was a gift from someone. So thank you to that human. I appreciate you because I can't get my own hands on one. So I love Elmer T. Lee. It's coming out of mash number 2, which is a rye. It's a high rye mash bill out of Buffalo Trace. Elmer T. Lee is a single barrel program, so they're all going to taste a little bit different. But I just love this. This could be my everyday drinker if it wasn't so rare and hard to get my hands on. For those of you who don't know who Elmer T. Lee was, Elmer T. Lee was a master distiller at Buffalo Trace Distillery, and he was hired by Colonel Blanton. And it took him it wasn't an easy job to get, but he got the job. And he was working under Colonel Blanton, and he decided that because Colonel Blanton loved to find these honey barrels and then roll the barrels down the hill to his house at the end of the distillery and have these epic parties, that Elmer wanted to create a single barrel program. So Elmer T. Lee was the man who brought you Blanton's, which was the first single barrel bourbon ever in the US in 1984. So this man is a legend among legends in my book, and this whiskey was created to commemorate his contribution to the bourbon world. Everyone that passes through Buffalo Trace's doors is a legend, including Weller, including Elmer and Blanton. All these people, they've contributed so much, and so I love this. It's a nice 12-year-old single barrel.
I tried to get my hands on the 100-year tribute, but came short.
I killed a bottle at Boulevard one. It was not cheap, but I did it.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's my favorite coming out of Buffalo Trace. But I have a secret favorite, which is 1792. So Sazerac also owns 1792, or Barton 1792 distillery. So this bourbon for me is my go-to. I love the high rye. It's a high rye mash bill. It's a gritty distillery where this is made. It's not super modernized. It's still weighing out, proofing down, weighing out with water with old scales. They're not digitalized. I mean, just the craftsmanship that goes into this is really exciting as well. So those are my two favorite whiskeys. Yeah,
and we are going to have a barrel pick of 1792 at some point, hopefully later this year as well. And that's a great whiskey as well. So Katie, obviously you did not disappoint, at least to me. You have phenomenal taste, which I expected nothing less.
Thank you.
I think that's it. I do just have a couple last parting words for our members. Lastly, thank you very much for being part of our club. If this is your first month, we hope that it's the first of many. And we look forward to next month, where we'll be having a double feature in our basket, where we have a Buffalo Trace barrel pick and an Eagle Rare barrel pick in the same basket.
You guys are spoiled.
Seriously. And then our Blanton's barrel pick will be the May feature. So if you're part of the club already, lots of good picks coming up, and we're working on lots of fun stuff for the future. Our special guest next month will be a very famous person from Buffalo Trace Distillery. Katie, obviously I know you're extremely famous as well, but we'll be joined next month by Freddie Johnson from Buffalo Trace Distillery, who, if you haven't seen the documentary Neat, you should watch that documentary and learn a little bit more about Freddie and his history with Buffalo Trace. And we'll do some
his signature move
with Freddie next month. And we just look forward to just continuing to give everyone some great knowledge about whiskey. And Katie, thank you again so much. And we appreciate your time.
Yeah, of course. Oh my gosh, Freddie's going to be a gem. So I worked at a very hotspot nightclub restaurant in LA, and I saw celebrities left and right every day. I have never been more starstruck than when Freddie Johnson gave me my tour at Buffalo Trace Distillery. It was the most incredible experience. You guys are in for a treat. Do not miss it. Tell all your friends just to tune in at the very least. I mean, this guy is a legend. I'm so excited for you. That is awesome, awesome news.
Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous. So I'll have to compose myself.
Yeah, he's chill. He's great. Oh, I'm so excited for you, Trevor. That's going to be amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And it was a delight to talk to you this evening. And I look forward to a day very soon where we can meet up in person for a dram.
Absolutely, guys. Cherish that Weller. Enjoy it. I know my counterparts in Oregon or in Seattle, rather, are mad because they can't even get their hands on any barrels of Weller foolproof. So cherish it, enjoy it, and be patient with us. We have more coming. So keep up the support. We really appreciate all the love you show to Weller, and have a wonderful evening.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Cheers.